Hello, Patreon. Thank you for being here. I hope everyone's year is off to a good start. I did have some sort of sinus infection or something in January, but I'm over it, doing great, still here, still writing this thing. All the first drafts I have done so far are right around the maximum word count that I like to have in a script. It's quite possible some big chunks will be cut out in editing. So we'll see what happens, but I do expect most of the episodes in this season to be on the long side. The term deep dive gets thrown around a lot when people are describing season 1, so we'll see what they think about this. I think it's a good thing, longer season, more content. But I was thinking I could talk about intros this month. The little intros that every episode has, they're a useful device, especially if you're trying to make something that will hopefully cause people to want to press play on it and start it over again as soon as they're finished with it. Those abstract, from out of left field intros specifically can help keep listeners from thinking they know where everything's headed and starting to tune out. It's sort of storytelling for the Ritalin generation, I guess. A lot of those intros will make more sense the second time through an episode, the second time through a season, etc. I'm not really sure how I decided to use the intros this way. I don't really remember that being a conscious debate. It seems more like one of those things that showed up with the whole idea for the show. I feel like the intros were just part of what the show was always going to be. I do remember the first thing I typed when I sat down to write the Spade Cooley episode was the word ballad comes from a Latin word meaning to dance. Again, I'm not sure I knew that was going to be this little intro on murder ballads and how they're based on true stories, because there's no real connection between Spade Cooley and murder ballads. He didn't really play folky music. Really, that's almost a writing prompt, a way to think about something to sort of distract yourself from the fact that you're sitting there trying to get started on writing something, which is something that writers always make a big deal out of. There's the blank page right there, and how intimidating that can be, I guess. Just don't let it stay blank, write something down that you want to think about and go from there. And it can get left in, if it's good, if it works, it gets left in. Because if that intro does put you in a certain headspace to be able to tell a particular story, then it's likely that it would also put your listeners or readers or whatever the case may be into that same headspace to be receptive for the way you want to tell that story. It's sort of like sneaking everyone in the side door for a backstage view of the play that's about to start. You think you've seen this play before. Have you seen it from this angle? Come with me. So yeah, maybe that's just the way I started and it worked, so I kept doing it. I'm not really sure. Once I became aware of the fact that each episode was going to have an intro of some kind, there are many different ways you can use that. Each one doesn't have to be, here's the etymology of a word. There were several intros in season 1 that I knew could work for virtually any episode of the show. So I went ahead and wrote those about 90% of the way before I had enough of the scripts together to be able to decide, okay, this intro that I have done should go with this episode. The pop country ruined country radio intro to the Tom T. Hall episode is an example of that. Just about any episode of the podcast could take a detour into the pop country argument. So I knew that would work somewhere, and I knew that it would be a cool thing to do, and it just ended up working best with Tom T. Hall because of aspects of that story. There's a lot of that stuff this time around too. There are intro ideas I've had since season 1 that are working for season 2, which is nice. Last month I talked about how scripts with strongly linked subjects or topics can have large portions chopped out of one and pasted into another. And it's the same thing with the intros, really. If there's more to some bit of an episode that would take too long or be awkward to sidebar in that episode, then you can just take it all out, move it to the intro of another episode that covers some of the same ground, and you've got an intro started. There's obviously going to be a lot of that kind of thing in season 2, with the episodes more or less all being connected to each other this time around. I think there's also a way to use many of the intros to sort of tell a parallel story to the main story being told in each episode. It's funny, every time I sit down to make one of these videos, it feels like I come up with some different analogy for the part of the process that I've been thinking about. It occurred to me that a lot of what I used to do when making mix CDs goes into this also. I used to make mix CDs. I even made mix tapes before that. I'm old enough, but mix CDs are really where I got into taking it seriously. And I would spend a good amount of time on each one. You know, if you're making a mix CD for someone, you want it to be good. And part of it being good is flow. You want the songs to sort of flow in to each other in a way that makes sense, cultivates a vibe, if you will. So one thing I'd always do when making a mix CD is just click through and listen to the very end of each song to hear only how that song ended and flowed into the next song. And if that didn't work for me, for whatever reason, then I would look at how to move things around to make that moment of transition a little better. And I think that those moments of transition are possibly even more important than the songs themselves. Maybe you've got this song that's your favorite song of all time and you want to get it on this mix CD, but if you can't find a place for it, if it doesn't make sense after any of the songs or before any of the songs that you also want to put on that mix CD, then that favorite song's not going to make it on there, you know? And that's just the way that it is. Those moments of transition are when something like that becomes apparent. Once you're locked into a good song, you're locked into it until it ends, you know, but then every time a song ends, it's back to that moment of truth. What's going to happen next? Is this going to be clumsy or is it going to flow? Sometimes you hit on these perfect matches where a song has like a drum outro that stops on a snare hit, and then the next song kicks off with this guitar chord that happens to be in the same key as the last song. It's like these songs were made to be put on a mix together. That kind of transitional moment can actually boost the perceived quality of the second song for the listener. You know, maybe this is a song they would have liked if they heard it out in the wild in some other context, but hearing it in this context with this moment of transition, that could become one of their favorite songs because of that moment. That's very much the way that I think of pacing and flow for this whole season. You know, an episode is this big thing, and for the most part, it will be delivered with a consistent tone. But an intro is a chance to subvert that tone or enhance that tone, complement that tone, color it in dozens of ways. And it's good to have those little extra moments, like little buffers, little breaks, little intermission moments that you can twist to control that the way that you want, to keep everything fresh and keep everything moving along. So as I get these scripts to various stages of completion, and the intros start to fall into place between them, and it becomes one thing. So that's how I'm spending my time these days. It's going well. Y'all take care of yourselves. I will see you next month.